Welcome to Justice Beyond the Bench, a podcast by the International Association of Women Judges. I'm Jane Charles Voltaire.
And I'm Amy Lewis. In this series, we spotlight women across the global justice sector who are leading efforts to advance gender equality, strengthen judicial systems, and champion inclusive leadership.
From courtrooms to communities, we'll hear powerful stories and unpack the strategies shaping women's leadership in law and the judiciary. It's time to go beyond the bench.
Today, we are joined by Lorraine Smith van Lin, an international human rights lawyer and head of fellowships at the Clooney Foundation for Justice, where she leads the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program. Launched in 2023, this multifaceted annual program places early career African women lawyers at top human rights organizations working to challenge repressive and discriminatory laws and policies across the continent. Through mentorship, training, and exposure to extensive network, the program equips the next generation of feminist lawyers with the tools they need to advance the rights of women and girls in Africa.
Lorraine is also the founder and executive director of Talawa, Justice for Women, a nonprofit organization that connects and amplifies the voices of women leaders from grassroots and survivor-led organizations in the Global South, equipping them with tools to advocate for justice and gender equality worldwide. Talawa, a Jamaican word meaning small but mighty, full of fight and strength, captures both the spirit of the women Lorraine champions and tenacity she brings to her own work as a passionate defender of women and survivors.
With more than 2 decades of experience as a prosecutor, magistrate, legal advisor, and consultant, Lorraine has dedicated her career to advancing victim rights, strengthening justice systems, and ending violence against women.
Welcome, Lorraine, to Justice Beyond the Bench, Waging Justice for Women, Advancing the Rights of Women and Girls Across Africa.
Thank you
Welcome,
so
Lorraine.
much. It's a pleasure to be a part of this podcast.
Thank you.
We're so excited to have you today and so glad you could join us. As we mentioned, you've had such a wide-ranging career in international justice, from the Jamaican courts to grassroots work in Africa. So maybe you could tell our listeners a little bit about what first drew you to focus specifically on advancing the rights of women and girls.
Thank you so much, Amy. I have always been deeply moved by the intersection of justice and human dignity. And from very early in my career, I noticed how disproportionately women and girls are affected by discrimination, by violence. I saw it as a prosecutor in Jamaica with the many rape cases I was able to do. I saw it when I was on the bench. And I noticed that even when I came to the international arena, crimes against women and girls were always seemingly at the top of every court list. And whether it was in the courtroom or in communities around the world, and particularly in Africa where I work, it just became clear to me that although justice systems can be very powerful and they should ensure accountability for women and girls, they often fell short in addressing gender specific injustices. So I wanted to focus on women and girls. I wanted to focus on the rights that they have because they are often at the margins of legal protection, even though they are the most vulnerable. And I've also seen that historically, whether you're talking about women in the Caribbean or women in Africa, their voices are the ones that have historically been silenced and their rights overlooked. And so I decided that as a woman myself and as a woman with a daughter, I wanted to bring about a change. And this is why I decided to focus on women and girls. And so the more I worked on these issues, the more I've learned that true justice isn't really about trying to just hold perpetrators accountable. It's about creating a world where women and girls are empowered to live free from discrimination, violence, and fear. And that has kind of been my driving force. And this is why I continue to do it. And you know what? I don't believe in even just stopping at working on those issues, but I believe in empowering and championing the next generation of women lawyers who can do that too.
Such a wonderful way of, I think, thinking holistically of how we're going to really be able to change a dynamic, as you say, that is so prevalent across countries, continents, in terms of women's oppression, women's lack of access, in terms of, yes, justice, but also the prevailing biases that continue to undermine their ability to really be able to lead full lives, free from violence, and how there is that intersection, of course, with justice, but also in terms of how a societal shift needs to happen. So I think you've put it so wonderfully that it goes beyond, right, the courtroom. We really need to look more holistically, and it seems the work you've been doing over these decades really reflects that. You know, Lorraine, you founded an organization, Talawa, which, as I mentioned in the intro, means small but mighty, full of fight and strength. How does this concept reflect your own journey and leadership style?
Thank you so much. That's such an interesting question. I founded Talawa because as a Jamaican, that word means so much to me. In Jamaica, when somebody seems small or insignificant and they're often overlooked, but they come with power and with fight and they surprise people because you don't expect this from somebody who looks like they cannot possibly be a mover or a shaker. You say they're talawa. That means they're small, they're powerful. They're small, but they're powerful and full of strength and fight. And it resonates with me because, I'm from a small island, and even though Jamaicans have achieved a lot across the world, they're known for music, reggae music, they're known for athletics. The reality is that when you come to the international space, you don't often have the loudest voice. But it wasn't so much about me and my personal journey. I was actually inspired by women in northern Uganda who I met as survivor leaders. Many of them had been abducted, and when I met them and I realized that, we had come to speak with them, to hear their stories and quote unquote help them, I realized that they had so much power and resilience, and they were the ones who actually left an indelible mark on me because of their spirit of just not giving up. So they seemed insignificant. They were being ignored in some ways by, government authorities in the sense that they had been waiting for years for a transitional justice bill to be passed just to get reparations for what they suffered. But they hadn't given up. They formed organizations, they formed movements, they formed community collectives, and they came together to work on behalf of other survivors and to find some means of getting redress for the wrongs that they suffered. And I decided when I saw them, the only word that came to me was Talawa. And so this has really left an imprint on me, and it has contributed to how I have formed my own leadership style. From seeing these women, I have also decided to lead with intentionality, with empathy, and with conviction. Because I realize that if you don't do that, it does not make any sense, especially when you're fighting for gender justice issues. And so this is how this Talawa notion has come to just become a part of my DNA. And it has really helped in terms of my decision to form this organization, which was designed to connect these women survivor leaders and subsequently their children, by the way, who asked us, you're working with our mothers, what about us? And to amplify their voices by giving them access to spaces that I have, but that they normally wouldn't have. And I really found that just by adopting that philosophy of Talawa, that you may seem to be insignificant, but don't underestimate the power of a small voice that has resilience and courage behind it. And that is what I used, and that's what motivated me to start this organization.
That's such a beautiful, beautiful way of putting it, and using your voice and your position to fight for survivors and to help them exercise their agency, amplify their voices. And this concept of talawa, it reminds me so much of the women lawyers that you work with as well in the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program, and the work that they're doing too. And as we mentioned, you lead this program, and I was wondering if you could even share a little bit more about what the fellowship program is about, why it was developed, what makes it unique, and how does the program help advance justice for women and girls in Africa? We talk about this concept of Talawa and the Caribbean, but how can we translate this, and how can the women lawyers that you work with embody this concept when they're doing this work in Africa as well?
Absolutely. And I love this question because the idea of a Talawa woman is a woman who has overcome, who is resilient, who is courageous, who is powerful, irrespective of what she has gone through. And this is exactly what is embodied by the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program and what attracted me to it. I just see this as a continuation of my passion for mentoring women wherever they are and whatever space they find themselves. The Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program does just that. It was developed in 2023, and the aim of it was to equip the next generation of feminist lawyers to advance the rights of women and girls in their communities and to expand human rights organizations' capacity to increase access to justice for women and girls, but also to establish a network of feminist lawyers. We do that by investing in early career women lawyers. We fund their placement in one of the leading human rights organizations on the continent of Africa, where they are supervised and supported by the host organizations. They are supported, but they also support the host organization's work to advance justice through strategic litigation and advocacy. But then on the other side, I support them. Our team supports them through mentorship, through training. And the training is not just done by us. We bring on board African experts, leading feminist experts to train them in different themes from strategic litigation, feminist lawyering, media training, survivor centered approaches to justice. They have this monthly training. So while we are simultaneously building their expertise in strategic litigation and advocacy, while having them practically embedded in these organizations, going to court, representing clients, doing outreach activities to schools. And for us, it was incredibly important to have this and to target early career women lawyers because they very often find it extremely difficult to get their foot in the door in the human rights world. And a lot of them are extremely passionate about what they're doing and wanted to change things in their countries, in their communities, but it can never get in. And so by investing in them, what we've actually done is to start what we hope will be a snowball effect where they will become part of this broader network and they will invest in other women lawyers. But by also helping these organizations to continue the work they are doing, it's just reaping incredible, incredible rewards and benefits, not just for the fellow themselves, but for the host and the communities that they serve. So I do think that this, at the end of the day, I think the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program is kind of the embodiment, at least for me, of what we need to be looking towards when we are thinking of waging justice or ending gender justice on the continent of Africa and perhaps beyond. And that is investing in those who are at the earliest stage of their career so that they can take the baton and keep going.
It seems, Lorraine, that, what you're talking about is really building this ecosystem, right? And ultimately, so much for an IWJ's perspective over these past decades has also been, I think, a close kind of reflection of the power of network, how reinforcing and finding ways that we can bring together and really invest, as you say, in women in law, whether they be judges, and in the case of the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program, lawyers, that there really is a profound kind of change factor that can happen there.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more.
We talked a little bit earlier about the ongoing challenges that you're seeing on the ground with regards to what's happening to also women and girls still today on the continent in Africa, but also obviously around the globe. What do you think are some of the ongoing, maybe you can talk about those ongoing challenges that are faced, and what do you think is also continued to be required to address those challenges?
Thanks very much. We know at the top of the list of ongoing challenges would be the gender based violence that women on the continent continue to face, whatever form it takes, whether it takes the form of child marriage or cultural practices that can be harmful to women, like female genital mutilation, whether it takes the form of domestic violence, whatever form it takes, whether in conflict or in peacetime, gender based violence sits at the top of the list because that's what we're seeing. But it's coupled with other issues that women face, including lack of access, lack of social support, and deeply rooted economic inequality. And sometimes economic inequality are the drivers of some of these gendered violence that we see. So we're seeing that women often carry the burden of unpaid care work. They're overrepresented in informal economy, and they have limited access to land, credit, digital tools. There are issues, and a number of our fellows are working on some of these cases, inheritance issues. You know what is interesting? We're seeing intersections between the different types of harm that women suffers. So I think at the crux we have specific types of harms that women suffer, but these harms are also, I would say, exacerbated by deeply rooted social norms and practices and cultural practices, as well as in some cases legal barriers. So I feel like in order to address this, we need to have a multifaceted, multi-layered approach to dismantle systemic barriers and to address some of these systemic challenges. And this is why I think the fellowship program is unique in terms of how we try to approach it. And I would actually say it's not just the fellowship program because, the fellowship program is part of the Waging Justice for Women program at the Clooney Foundation for Justice. And our focus is three-pronged. So we use strategic litigation as one of the tools, legal advocacy, including through legal clinics, and the fellowship program. So that sort of three-pronged, as you mentioned, ecosystem approach is one way that we think can be a really effective way of addressing some of these endemic harms and discriminatory practices that women face on the continent.
I think that, really gets to the heart of everything, from not only what are women and girls experiencing from a legal and policy perspective, but what are the actual things that they're facing on the ground and thinking about the ways that strategic litigation can be used to transform the legal system or transform from a policy perspective, but how does that actually trickle down, so to speak, or how does that actually start to address some of these other things that you're talking about, whether they're sociocultural barriers, whether they're economic inequality as a driver of things like gender-based violence? And how do we take that kind of broader perspective, those legal frameworks, those policy frameworks, and help apply them in a way that women and girls are actually getting the relief? The laws are being applied in a way that they're actually able to start to overcome some of these more on the ground barriers. And I know that some of that is done because you're working with host organizations, you're working with feminist or mostly women-led host organizations that are really very close to these issues, that are working with the women themselves, in addition to lawyers or in addition to working with this fellowship program. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about those partnerships and how you kind of decide what areas to target, what strategic litigation to seek out, but what other things you're doing to work with these host organizations and how you partner with them to ensure that their local expertise really leads the way.
I think I'd love to start with a story to answer that question, to really demonstrate the power of strategic litigation as a tool and why we choose to use it and to work with organizations that make this an integral part of their work approach in dealing with women and girls. So we think of strategic litigation as a really powerful tool because, it brings about, we hope, systemic change that goes beyond a single case. So there's a particular case right now. We're actually awaiting judgment from the ECOWAS court. And this is a case involving a woman in Sierra Leone. She is 19 years old now, but she was married much earlier. So I think she was married at around 13. And her parents actually took her to to her quote unquote, her husband. And she was terribly assaulted during the marriage. And as a result, unfortunately, she was not just assaulted by her husband himself, but she was assaulted by the the other wife because she was, I think, either the second wife or, well, she wasn't the first. I think she was the second wife. And the first wife assaulted her. Just she was the victim of beatings at that age and so on. And the trauma that she suffered is indescribable. She kept running away. They kept taking her back. And in the long run, there was an unfortunate incident in which she, pushed the child of one of the wives of the other wife, and he fell and died. She was arrested and charged for murder and brought before the court, but the prosecution did not take into account the fact that she had been a victim of this gendered violence. So she was basically put to serve this life sentence because she had been convicted of murder. And she was held at the president's pleasure. But our host organization, our partner advocate, who works directly with incarcerated women in Sierra Leone, they really have a passion for working with women who have come in contact with the law, and specifically those who have been the victims of gendered violence. So they basically try to get the prosecution and the judiciary to look behind the women who seem to be just perpetrators. And they lobbied for her, they advocated for her, even up to the office of the president. And then they partnered with another host organization that we work with, which is a regional organization, IHRDA, the Institute for Human Rights and Development in Africa, who regularly bring cases before the regional courts. And they partnered with IHRDA to actually bring this matter before the ECOWAS court to try to get the court to, have Sierra Leone consider the fact that this was a gendered crime at its base. So, as I said, the judgment, we're still awaiting judgment, but we've seen some positive decisions come out of that court, decisions that have also been handed down in cases brought by IHRDA as well. In the meantime, Advocate continued their lobbying, and the president actually issued a pardon for this victim perpetrator in the meantime. And she was released now to a safe house, and they've continued to support her. What am I saying? We choose to work with organizations that, one, prioritize dealing with gender violence issues, working on issues of strategic litigation, and strategic litigation involving cases with women and girls. Strategic litigation on issues that will break some of the systemic discrimination and legal barriers that we see that are impeding the advancement of women and girls. But how we do it, I think, is something that is absolutely dear to my heart, because it's not us stepping in and going to court and representing the clients. No, the fellows go, we invest in them, but it is the host organizations that are embedded on the continent. They're dealing with the clients. They know the situation. They are the ones taking the lead. And this is something that I can tell you I am personally passionate about, because I really strongly believe in local ownership. And so the idea is that it is helping to build their capacity, but at the same time, it is also expanding their reach in the work that they are doing. So to answer your question, Amy, I think it's really about, as you say, we are part of that ecosystem, but the leaders are really the host organizations. And I haven't even talked to you about advocacy. I've just limited it now to strategic litigation.
Well, I think now is the perfect time for you to go ahead and tell us a little bit more about that advocacy piece as well.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that the program does is to require the fellows to identify at least one strategic litigation case, but also to engage in advocacy. And the advocacy can be so we require essentially two types of advocacy, or we strongly urge it and we say do it because it helps to build you, but it also helps to promote the work that the organization is doing. So the first, we strongly urge the fellows to do advocacy in human rights, career building type advocacy to schools, to girls at universities, that sort of advocacy. That's more about career related, I would call that even outreach. But the legal advocacy to communities, to policymakers, that's something that is also strongly encouraged as a part of this program. And we're actually seeing the girls do it and get very excited about doing it. And one of the tools that they use are these mobile legal aid clinics. The legal aid clinics are one of the most impactful ways that we've seen to bring justice directly to people in underserved communities where formal legal services are completely out of reach. So we have about 4 countries or 4 organizations that we work with that are really very focused on using legal aid clinics. So in Malawi, there are 2 organizations. We have one in the Gambia, Female Lawyers Association of the Gambia, and in Liberia, the Association of Female Lawyers in Liberia. We have others, but the legal aid clinics or fellows in Malawi are the ones that work mainly using the legal aid clinics as a tool. And what we see, which is incredibly interesting, this legal aid clinic, it has a dual purpose. So it allows them to go to these remote areas as a team. So you have lawyers, you may have paralegals as well. Maybe a counselor travels with a team, and they go into markets where there are lots of people, and they do this outreach about different topics and different issues that affect women, child marriage, domestic violence, and so on. And they provide free legal advice, rights education, and training, even for community leaders, which is incredibly important. So they engage with traditional leaders, chiefs, religious leaders to provide crucial information about ending harmful cultural practices that discriminate or perpetuate discrimination against women. And just being able to give this information is life changing for many women and girls as well, because some of these legal clinics are taken to schools and they combine the legal clinic idea with schools outreach. So they speak to girls and to boys in the schools and to teachers about the rights of women and girls, about some of the challenges that they face. So it has several functions to it. It is amazing form of advocacy and outreach, but it also is a way to get women who normally would not be able to access legal advice, get to lawyers, to actually come get direct legal advice. And sometimes that's where we're able to spot cases that could be potentially strategic. So, in terms of just advocacy, our fellows are doing an incredible job. And it's something that I personally support and strongly encourage them to do. And it has really taught them to just think very strategically about the messaging. What do they want to say? How do they want to say it? What's their audience? And I think it's an incredibly effective tool.
So much of having a vision in terms of addressing, I think, the challenges that you've outlined today is about, as you said, how do you communicate this to the communities that you want to be ultimately supporting? And how do you find cases? How do you become those advocates that can really connect ultimately, right, with the people that need it the most? And going to community and where people are, markets, schools, more kind of remote areas where you don't always find spaces for traditional or kind of more formal legal systems is so crucial to all that.
Absolutely.
It's interesting also for, I think, from IWJ's perspective, we've for many years had a wonderful association also in Malawi. And on a personal level, I had an opportunity to go around the country with our association members to be able to really try to address some of the lack of access to justice realities. Being in remote communities, trying to work increasingly with traditional leaders so that, you can make this link, right, with formal
Hmm.
justice systems as well, and how important it is for our members and our association there. But I think in so many different contexts, IWJ associations are finding ways, right, to really bridge that gap between the formal systems in which they operate and the reality on the ground of a real distance, unfortunately, for the communities that they want to serve ultimately. So, waging justice for women is also part of a broader coalition with other co-impact partners. And it's been wonderful to, for example, even speak with you today about the work that you're doing, and share a little bit about the nexus, I think, with IWJ. But can you share an example also of other kinds of collaboration with perhaps partners that has amplified the fellowship's program impact in ways that maybe couldn't have been achieved alone?
Absolutely. I am a very strong believer in collaboration. I think collaboration lies at the heart of feminist advocacy. We don't try to do it alone and we can't. And so, one of the things that I have learned is that by working with others, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can build on each other's strengths. So that kind of collaborative working means that we strengthen that network. We get, or it's our voices are amplified, and we're able to expand our reach. And talking about collaboration, where just this podcast alone is a reflection of the fact that working collaboratively with other partners is a way to ensure that the messaging for the work that you do is taken beyond our networks, and it has a much more impactful reach. So yes, we have learned it is collaboration does mean that you have to be willing to listen and to adapt. And you might have to sometimes navigate power dynamics, but who doesn't? The reality is that we're all trying to find a way to work within a space that is not always welcoming to us. And our ideas are not always supported by those who we're advocating to. But if we work together, we get to what we need to get to. And this is why we've also chosen to work with ten host organizations. Because of this fellowship program, they are also working together more. We're seeing increased collaboration even among the host organizations. The supervisors are part of a network. The fellows are part of a network. The alumni are part of a network. So it's coming back to that ecosystem concept that you mentioned. And that's how we see it.
I think that really speaks to the heart of what we talk about when we talk about feminist leadership. And that is being in community, being in connection, breaking down those silos and those hierarchies, and really collaborating with each other, drawing on each other's strengths, pushing each other, challenging each other, in ways that, yes, may sometimes be uncomfortable, but gets us to a better place than we could get to just on our own. And even at IAWJ, creating that network is something that obviously we think is so powerful with our own network of women judges. But thinking about how, judges can themselves even go beyond the bench and what that looks like to partner with other agencies in the justice sector, whether it's early career feminist lawyers, whether it's civil society organizations, whether it's judicial decision-making bodies, and how do we kind of bring everyone to the table and say, "Look, we all want or hope to want the same thing. If you're not there yet, how do we get you there?" And really bridging those gaps between sometimes who the decision makers are and who is really on the ground doing the work. And I think through strategic litigation, through partnerships that that's all part of this kind of feminist leadership and this ecosystem that we've been talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to say that I absolutely love and value what you do and what IWJ brings to this kind of discourse, because One of the one of the groups that I think is really important to bring into these discussions would be the judiciary. And so having you be a part of this ecosystem, having you reach out to those who are the decision makers in the legal space for the most part, and having them understand that they are not separated from what is happening at the grassroots level. They are an integral part of it. And so giving them the opportunity to understand what some of the challenges through those lenses, I think is incredibly important. So I also highly value the work that you do. I can say that I remember when I was on the bench, it's always difficult to keep this sense of, you want to be neutral, you don't want to be influenced by what's happening on the outside, and balancing that with the need to be judicially aware, to be sensitive to what is really happening so that your decisions are informed by the lived realities of the people that you're actually dealing with in court. So, what you do is also incredibly important.
Well, thank you for that, Lorraine. I think what you really hit the heart of it when you talked about the lived realities, and we talk a lot about how the judiciary can really be representative of the people that it serves, right? When we talk about getting more women into leadership or more women on the bench generally, it's how can the judiciary be reflective of those lived realities? How can those perspectives be brought to the bench? Because yes, of course, the judiciary is supposed to be neutral and hone the law, but the law does not exist outside of people, and it doesn't exist outside of the impacts that it has on communities. Um,
Exactly.
so I think that's really a really salient point. I am so excited to hear so much about the work that the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship is doing and all the successes that you've had. And I know you've talked about some of the impacts that have been just so incredible. But can you maybe tell us a little bit more about what's next on the horizon? What does success ultimately look like, in the next 5 years, 10 years? And how do you measure that success, or how will you know that you've really moved the needle or shifted the needle for women's rights?
That's a great question, one that I'm grappling with myself right now. So I'll start with the successes that I can celebrate now or that we are celebrating. So we've seen some amazing milestones just in the first fellowship year in 2023 to 24. We saw the fellows working on an incredible number of cases, 230 cases relating to women's rights, and they provided legal information to over 1,000 women through legal clinics and other community engagements. We saw them engaging with over 2,660 school children, about 1,300 of which were girls. That was just in 2023 to 2024. And remember, we're talking about 10 fellows. In the current year, up to August of this year, our fellows have already worked on 174 cases and reached over 1,238 students and 26 teachers. So I'm starting at that point. I'm starting at the point of this is already quite an impactful program from our measurements. And we actually try to track this through a case tracker system that we've developed. But when we look ahead, there is so much more that I'd like to see. And I think I'd probably need a whole podcast for that alone. But I'm going to summarize what I'd love to see. I want to deepen our impact. I want to deepen our impact through ensuring that we can not just expand, because obviously for every program that you have, there are going to be resource challenges. But I want to deepen what we are doing by ensuring that more fellows, potentially in regions that are underrepresented, are building greater bridges in terms of their advocacy and maybe some of the strategic litigation cases that they're actually doing. So I'm working with the fellows to kind of see how can you really hone your skills in identifying cases that are particularly strategic at this juncture of the continent. We want to, though, and it's a dream, so bear with me here. We would love to see also beyond Africa how we can begin to engage possibly in Asia. That's a much longer stretch for us in terms of whether we head in that direction. But the idea is where our fellows can begin to have a look at what's happening even beyond their continent. And how can other continents, and possibly even in Latin America, in the Caribbean as well, where I'm from, how can we learn from some of the wins that we've seen on the continent of Africa? Finally, I would just want to continue to push our fellows to use every opportunity they can to speak out in different platforms about some of the legal and policy challenges they're seeing on the continent. So, in that regard, we are encouraging more of our fellows to write, to use social media platforms, to do whatever they need to do in terms of advocacy to take their message beyond the continent. And for us, that is really ensuring that what happens on the continent is not seen as a continental issue. It is seen as something that can potentially impact women and girls wherever they are.
We love that you're dreaming big and, so much of what you talk about now in terms of your vision, deepening this impact is so critical to really be able to holistically address these ongoing challenges. on the African continent, but as you mentioned, and we've been talking about today, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, certainly I think ways that, those fellows, those alumni, those organizations that you're working with can leverage what they've been able to learn and bring that to a new height, a new platform. What a wonderful, beautiful vision.
Thank you.
So, Lorraine, we're coming to the close, and one of the things that we've been asking all of our guests in doing these conversations has been, in one word, what do you think will have the greatest impact on advancing women's leadership in law?
One word is really hard for a lawyer. It is
Yes,
just so
We
hard.
know.
we know.
It's just so actually, I want to use the word, let me use a phrase. It's intentional investment. I believe that as lawyers, if we are going to do anything to establish women leaders who can take some of these issues that are impacting women and girls forward, we have got to invest. We have got to invest in them, not just in their careers, not just in them as individuals, which we should, but we have to invest in the ecosystems that support women to lead, to thrive, and to shape the legal landscape on their own terms. We've got to invest. We have got to invest in them. And investment seems like a financial term, but it's not only a financial term. Investment is essentially mentorship. So, mentoring women, particularly early career women lawyers, is a way of investing in them to be able to find their footing, find their place in this world and in this human rights space, and to really move the needle. And so, mentoring for me is an investment in early career women lawyers. It's an investment in women and girls that I can't reach, but I'd love to reach. I cannot get to all of the young girls who are suffering child marriage in Malawi or Tanzania. I can't. I cannot get to, those who are experiencing FGM in the Gambia or Sierra Leone or Liberia. I can't. But by investing in early career women lawyers, by investing in host organizations who are trying their best to reach to these communities, by investing in partners who are working on these issues. And I don't mean financially investing. I mean just taking the time to sit down, to listen, to hear them, to work with them, to expose, to amplify their voices. By doing that, I believe that's how we're going to advance women leaders in law. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's such a powerful concept. And when we talk about investment, sometimes, like you said, people think that that only means financial, but there are so many ways to invest in this work, through advocacy, through collective amplification, through sharing our stories. And we're just so grateful to you, Lorraine, for
Yeah.
sharing so much of the work and your own personal journey today too, and for giving us such an insightful look into the work of the Waging Justice for Women Fellowship Program. And today's conversation has just underscored how powerful legal tools can be when combined with grassroots leadership and coalition building. And from the mobile legal aid clinics that you talked about, reaching underserved communities, to this intentional investment in fellowships cultivating the next generation of African women lawyers, we do see how systemic change can be driven both from the ground up and through strategic litigation. And thank you, too, for helping us share a vision where women and girls can shape the law and the legal landscape on their own terms.
Thank you. It has been such a pleasure talking to you. And I really thank you also just for the opportunity to highlight not what we are doing at Waging Justice for Women, but to highlight the incredible work being done by our partner organizations in Africa. So thanks, Amy. It's been an amazing pleasure. Thanks to you both. Thanks to IAWJ for this this amazing opportunity and for this partnership and collaboration.
Thank you for tuning into Justice Beyond the Bench. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Want to learn more about our work and support our mission? Visit us at iawj.org, where you can explore our programs, join our global network, or make a donation to help advance gender equity in judiciaries around the world. See you next time.